Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. It is Tuesday. Matt and myself will be recapping the game between the Baltimore Ravens and the Las Vegas Raiders from last night. Ended up being a pretty good game that went into overtime. We'll talk a little bit about waivers and then our hits and misses from week one in our weekly rankings for the Campus to Canton website. Matt, how are you doing on this beautiful Tuesday?
Doing pretty good. You know, it's that point in the season where you remember that as much as you're excited for football to return, you're going to be tired for 5 months.
Yeah. I feel like that's been here for a while for me. I don't know. I feel like, this year, obviously due to, we launched this website and everything going on. I feel like there was no off season. There really hasn't been, but that's all right because we love it, right? We love doing this stuff. Love being a part of football and getting to talk about it. So I can't really hate on it that much. It's definitely been it's been a lot of fun. It's been the most fun I've been having doing this stuff for years, and we have been doing this for quite. What is this? Is this our third year together? I did it a year by myself beforehand. So this is our third year doing this. So yeah, it's time flies. It doesn't feel like it. So let's.
I was a young man when we started, and now I'm middle aged.
So was I. You guys think this is like, reddish blonde hair now. It's pure white from stress. I just dye it like constantly. So, but anyway, so let's jump into what happened last night between the Baltimore Ravens and I almost want to say I messed everything up anyway. So we are proud to be part of the Pigskin Podcast Network. I always forget to say that right at the beginning. Great network. We're thrilled to be a part of them. It's been a lot of fun. Ton of great podcasts, not just football, baseball, soccer, hockey, fantasy, everything. It's a whole lot of fun to be a part of them. Check them out. Matt.
Yes. Look, you want to get the kind of tools that help Bob Harris reach the Fantasy Football Hall of Fame? It is the Flash Update Pro at footballdiehards.com. We are currently in the midst of doing our first waiver run of the season. You want to get the insight and analysis that you need in the rankings to make the right decisions to thrive. You need the rankings, the cheat sheets, the mock drafts, the consistency tools, the target distribution, snap counts, and more that comes with Flash Update Pro. If you use the code ROUNDTABLE, you can get an additional 15% off the already low price of $24. So what are you waiting for? Head to footballdiehards.com today.
All right, so now we are definitely going to talk about that Monday Night Football game where the Ravens lose in overtime to the Raiders 33-27. The Ravens offense moved the ball very well. Tyson Williams and Latavius Murray scored on the ground. Lamar ran for 86 yards and threw for 235. What was your overall takeaway from the Baltimore Ravens offense, Matt?
I thought they looked good. I watched a lot of the first half on the Manning brothers broadcast. It was kind of fun to hear their input and back and forth. And then the second half, when it kind of got serious, especially that fourth quarter when I was going back and forth, I flipped over to the main broadcast because I needed just like the straight play-by-play so I could pace. I was excited. I called this my upset special. I thought the Raiders would win, but I thought it would be a close game. And Baltimore looked very good. Their offense moved the ball well at times. I think we saw probably the way it's going to run. Tyson Williams looked pretty good coming out there, had one huge run for a touchdown. Latavius Murray, just a few days with the team mixing in. I think those guys, I still think those are probably the guys. They didn't elevate Le'Veon Bell, and I think they've released Devonta Freeman. But otherwise, he's just hanging out there. Passing game, Lamar made a few nice throws. Marquise Brown had a nice game. Sammy Watkins had a couple of deep bombs. But we still see some struggles. There were some deep balls and balls down the seam that weren't quite right. I think they'll settle in. He got crushed on that last fumble. I'll be curious to see if that has an impact. But I thought the Ravens offense looked pretty good considering all that they've gone through.
Yeah, I mean, to lose not only realistically, you could say they're two starting running backs because they did use Gus Edwards a lot. So to lose J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and then Justice Hill, who they expected to come in and do a lot of some of the receiving work, we did get to see at least a little bit of Tyson Williams, and he did look good. I imagine Latavius Murray is going to continue to build up and be more a part of that offense. But they definitely look good. It's never easy to go into an opponent's home and win, especially that. I mean, you had, obviously it's Alliance Arena, right? Is that the name of it, if I'm remembering correctly?
Yeah, Allegiant.
Okay, so they opened it. They opened it last year, but obviously no fans were able to go because of COVID. So it was rocking the entire time, full of Raiders fans. Regardless of what you want to say, that it's just hard to go in and silence that. I watched a little bit of Peyton Manning and Eli as well. They were talking to Eli about that when he went in. I can't remember. I think it was the Cowboys went into Jerry World when they first opened it and actually beat them.
They're one of the few defending Super Bowl champions to lose an opening Thursday night game.
Yeah, so it was definitely I thought it was a really good game. I did not watch until the end. I finally ended up going to sleep like right in the middle of the fourth quarter. Did catch the end of it this morning. I rewatched the rest of the game. I recorded it and then came back and watched it when I was waiting to do some work this morning. Carr surprised me, but we'll get to, I guess we're talking about the Ravens. We'll get to the Raiders side in a minute. I was happy to see Marquise Hollywood Brown looked decent in this game. Won't lie, very happy that Mark Andrews did not have a massive game. That helped me out. Got a couple wins.
They just couldn't get him
they did.
Ball.
And a lot of that happened last year, too. I get criticized a lot for saying that, while Lamar Jackson is he is a very good quarterback, he struggles sometimes with making some throws. And we saw that last night. And in all honesty, I want to say it was in the third quarter. Mm-hmm. Mark Andrews was wide open about 20 to 30 yards down the field, and it reminded me exactly of that play last year, Monday night. I think it was week 13 or 14 against the Cleveland Browns, where Mark Andrews got wide open, and Lamar Jackson threw it over him. He didn't hit him. It just missed him. Go ahead.
He did that a couple of times. So I was listening to the Manning broadcast, and they made a couple of comments, but they're not the type to be super hypercritical. But there was another one later in the game. I think it was for Duvernay, where he just launched it out of bounds. There was no chance, no play to be made. And Brian Greasy, who, we forget, he was a decent quarterback. I had him in Denver. He's one of my top 5 favorite Broncos quarterbacks of my lifetime, which tells you how bad quarterback options have been in Denver. But he was talking about how that's a completely wasted play. There's a difference between trying to make a safe throw that is not going to get intercepted and one that, there's no chance nothing's going to happen. And there's a couple of those where he just didn't quite give the receiver a chance to try to make a play. And hopefully he'll get better. I didn't think the throwing volume was greatly increased from what I've seen in years past. I don't know how you felt.
No, I'm right there with you. And I just think it's something I've mentioned. And I do think that's why they drafted guys like Rashad Bateman and Tyler Wallace to help with that a little bit. We'll see. I do think they're going to have to lean heavier on the pass than they have in the past couple of years. Because while Williams did look good, as did Murray did at times, I think it's fair to say the Raiders' defense is not one of the better defenses they're going to play this year, so they're likely going to have to rely on Lamar and that passing game to get going. It was only week 1. I don't remember off the top of my head how much the Ravens played in the preseason. No, but I've heard a lot of people talking about it yesterday and today, and I completely agree with them. A lot of these teams that you saw not doing much in the preseason kind of struggled offensively last week or on Sunday, and I do think that's a big part of it. Is we used to see these guys play a little bit in game 2, then like an entire half in game 3, and then take that break in week 4.
Yeah.
Well, now you only have 3 games, and there was a lot of teams that didn't play at all. Now, didn't really seem to affect Matt Stafford and the Rams, but there was a lot of teams that it looked like it looked like it bothered them a little bit. The offenses weren't quite kind of up to what you would expect them to be. We saw a little bit of that last year because of COVID, so I think we'll give it a couple weeks and we'll probably see more of what Lamar really is going to be. Maybe it was just a little bit of, I don't want to say nerves, but first game back, all that stuff. You know, he missed a couple throws, but I mean, they're still very good.
Time with COVID too, or at least COVID protocol, which messes up. You have to wonder if that was an impact with a team like Tennessee too, where Tannehill and several of those guys were out with a COVID protocol, missing practice time. So not only are you not getting the game reps, you're not even getting all the practice reps.
Oh, I have to imagine it does. There's no way that at the NFL level you can miss practice time and everything, whether it's due to COVID, whatever, and be I mean, the only person I think could probably do this is Mahomes at this point, because the guy can do anything. I give up.
Or apparently Kirk Cousins, who missed a ton of training camp and cruised for a quick 300.
Captain Kirk, though, he's just nice, easy, you know, just he's consistent. That's what you love about him. That's what I love about him, at least.
If only his coach liked him as much as you do.
Well, that's true. Maybe they should ask me to come be the coach. I think I could do a pretty good job there. It was definitely a slow start for the Raiders, but Carr threw for 435 yards. Waller seemed like he was the only one who got every single target. He did end up with 19. Jackson 4 for 81, and then Renfro 6 for 70. Zay Jones with the big touchdown in overtime to win it. Ruggs looked good. What was your takeaway from the Raiders offense?
Yeah, I mean, Derek Carr was playing quarterback, looking at Darren Waller like he knew he was on my fantasy team and wanted to help. But I was a little nervous after that first half. He had like 13 targets, only 2 receptions. I was like, man, I gotta get some. He ends up 10, 105, a touchdown. He's a beast. He's going to be a beast. Raiders were a little slow to get on track. Josh Jacobs is already injured. I feel like that's a perpetual situation. Their offensive line is not incredible. Neither he nor Kenyon Drake looked particularly effective, though the Ravens' front end of their defense is probably the better part of the defense. Have to see if that improves. I was excited with not only the receiver usage, but the big plays in big moments. Bryan Edwards wasn't a huge factor early, but his 4 catches for 81 yards were predominantly in the fourth quarter and a beautiful catch in overtime. That gives you an indication that he's a guy Carr trusts in big situations. Hunter Renfro, his hairline might be receding, but his role in the offense seems to be going strong. I loved Andrew Mason, who's one of the Broncos beat writers. It's like Hunter Renfro, small hands, big results.
I saw you and I saw that you shared that.
Oh man, I love that. Well, and he seemed to be a clutch guy on third down, so he might have a continued sustained role that we've a little bit underestimated. Ruggs feels like he is what he is. They were trying to get him the ball a lot early and couldn't connect, but when they land those huge plays, they're game changers. Yeah. When they went down and they needed a score and he caught a 37-yard bomb, it turns things over. The interception in overtime, even though a couple of them were quick to say Carr messed up, he threw it and it hit Willie Snead in the hands.
Yeah,
popped it in the air.
That, yeah.
I do not feel like that is maybe Carr threw it a little harder than he'd like, but you're a professional receiver wide open on a slant. If it hits you in the hands,
you gotta catch it.
You gotta have it. Yeah. And then Zay Jones continues to exist out there for giant bomb touchdowns. That was a fun moment. I thought the Raiders looked pretty good at times, and the Ravens are not an easy opponent. So the Raiders always start fast. The question is, will they look like this in November?
Yeah, and I want to say that I do feel a little bit bad for Derek Carr. Like, he gets so much crap, and he really is a very good quarterback. And, I mean, if you talk about – I know the last 2 years you've talked about you didn't think they'd make the playoffs. As you just mentioned, they always get off to these hot starts, look like they're bound for the playoffs, and then something doesn't happen. it's never really because of Carr, though. It's usually because that defense can't stop teams from scoring. The Raiders are consistently putting up points. And again, we saw that last night. Now, Carl Nassib came up huge for them in getting that fumble on Lamar Jackson to allow them to then what looked like just Baltimore not realizing what was going on. And, I mean, it was almost like I really want to know, and I haven't seen any of the post-game stuff. I assume it wasn't a trick play. But the fact that, like, everybody was kind of, like, scrambling for the Raiders trying to get set, and then they called – it's almost like the Ravens weren't expecting them to call it, and they were going to call a timeout. And then they called it, and then Zay Jones just ran. And, like, everybody forgot that Zay Jones was on the field. So, I love the blown coverage, I love the Bryan Edwards catch. I honestly think he scored. I don't know. To me, it did not look like his knee was down, but I guess.
And that almost turned from, like, a super exciting moment to a tragedy because they couldn't pile drive it in with Carr, which I understand why people question, well, why not give it to Jacobs? Jacobs didn't look like he was healthy enough to move that pile. They were probably hoping the up quarterback would get in there. Then they had that stupid penalty, and then Snead pops it up for an interception. I thought, oh my God, we went from this game is over to now they're going to lose. This is going to be the most heartbreaking, but they got pressure on Lamar there at the end with Nassib and Crosby with Yannick Ngakoue on the bench with an injury. So that front could even be better.
Let's see here. So I forgot what I was about to say. Oh, so with Waller getting all of the targets, is there anybody else in this offense that you trust? Is it, is it Edwards who got the big play there? Is it, I mean, I don't really think there's anybody else. You can't, like, we talked a lot about it. We like Ruggs. He's a very good NFL player, but I think fantasy-wise, he's not someone you can trust unless it's best ball.
Ruggs is the perfect best ball player. I would like to see, I'm probably a little more cautious waiting before I feel like Edwards is an automatic start. He had 4 for 81, which is encouraging, only had 5 targets. And again, most of those came later in the game. Probably of the current guys, if I need a deep league flex right now, it's Renfrow because he seems to be getting consistent volume and he's in a spot and a role where, we've seen guys like that. Cole Beasley does that. We've seen, guys who are just kind of soaking up. That's how Jamison Crowder made his living for the Jets for a long time. Renfrow seems to be that role for the Raiders and seems to work for him. I still have high hopes for Edwards. He was, I ranked him 38 last week. He finished 47. One more, if he gets that touchdown, I was dead on.
Yeah. I'm excited to see if his role can expand. I mean, you got to remember, didn't really get a lot of time last year due to some injuries, and then with everything going on with COVID, I am excited to see this is really, in my opinion, kind of his real first year with this team and what he can do. Because I did not pick the Raiders to make the playoffs. I should pick them to be the worst in that division, but they looked a lot better at least last night than I expected them to. So,
9-8 energy.
They definitely do. I don't even think I had them with 9 wins. I think I had them with like 5.
No, so, only I thought they were going to be winning. That's just where I'm saying the NFC West clearly looks like the best division. But with that win, everyone in the AFC West won. That's going to be an intensely competitive division, and that's where one or two small things is going to make it or break it for Denver, the Chargers, and the Raiders. The Chiefs are going to be in there, but all those guys are going to be fighting to get in.
Oh, no, I agree with you. I think there's a couple divisions, maybe not now with Fitzpatrick going down, but I thought, the NFC East could be pretty good.
Well, especially not Washington.
Well, yeah, not even that. Look at how good, not even just fantasy-wise, but you mentioned it, like the Giants looked a lot better than I think a lot of people thought they were going to be against a very good Denver team. You've got the AFC North where, in my opinion, the 2 best teams in that division lost this weekend in the Browns and the Ravens. You had Cincinnati beating a team not a lot of people expected them to beat. You got the NFC North that the Packers may look like, at least right now, are coming back to the pack. You got the Bears, who I think just proved that they can hang with the Rams with Andy Dalton at quarterback. So what happens when they switch to Justin Fields? Maybe I was right with my first thought on Minnesota, that they're going to be decent with what happened. But I mean, there's a lot of very good teams. And the AFC East, I mean, the Patriots looked
a little bit better than we expected. The Saints looked better than we thought they were going to be. Carolina.
I think I only had.
Fortunately, we have the AFC South.
That's
here.
Well, not if Tyrod Taylor has anything to say about it, though. Houston
You
Texans
better
might
hope
be
he
in the
doesn't have
playoffs.
something to say about it because you're playing them
Trust
on
me.
Sunday.
Browns are going 0-2. Let's talk about some of the. I believe it.
Cleveland's going to fall into Lake Erie if that happens.
Well, could you imagine? Hey, it's a Tyrod Taylor revenge game, my friend. Tyrod Taylor revenge game. Let's jump in though and talk about some of the waiver wire options here for Week 1. All right, so at quarterback, the biggest one we just mentioned, we'll talk about the top two. You just mentioned how good the Saints looked, which we were not expecting. Jameis Winston at 35%, Tyrod Taylor at 4%, who I believe I just was looking at it. What did he finish? He was a top 10 option in fantasy this past week. He finished as QB 11. I'm sorry, just outside the top 10. Nowhere near where any of us expected him. And then you've got Taylor Heineke, who obviously will be the starter for at least 6 to 8 weeks with the Washington football team. Right now, we don't know if they'll bring anybody else in, but right now everything is they're going to stick with Heineke, so he's going to be the starter there. How would you kind of attack these? Is it easily Winston's the number one guy? And would you spend how much of your fab would you try to put on him, to bring him onto your team?
Yeah, it really depends on probably the kind of league that you're in, but I would rank them Winston, Taylor, Heineke, probably in that order for me going forward. You're probably looking at these guys. Winston is a guy I would consider in a 1 QB league because we've seen him be a top 10 fantasy quarterback before. Last full season he played, he was QB3. He finished as QB4 this week, only threw it 20 times. His big bugaboo has been turnovers. We won't really know if that's solved for a couple of weeks, but it looks like they have enough weapons for him to compete. They have a decently tough schedule, but he's the only guy, if I was in a 1 QB league, I'd be looking to put on. If you're in Superflex, Tyrod Taylor doesn't have any competition, so you can be pretty solid that he's going to be the guy unless they decide for some reason that they're going to activate Deshaun Watson. Seems like that's not the way they're going. Heineke, if I'm desperate, I'm picking him up. I don't really want to start him this week because it's a short week. Trying to go in against the Giants, who have a decent enough defense on Thursday night. I think Thursday nights have sometimes been an offensive slog. We got a really great game last week, but that was, we probably didn't factor in that for the first time opening week game, they had 10 days of rest to build into all that because there was no preseason. A lot of those guys didn't play. It was two exceptional teams. This is two different kind of offenses with two pretty good defenses. I expect a low-scoring slugfest game. And depending on how Heineke looks, they may reevaluate. I mean, some of these long-term injuries, we thought yesterday Raheem Mostert was going to be out for 8 weeks. Now they're saying they've just decided to put him on the shelf for the season. Ryan Fitzpatrick had a potential, they said, a hip ball pop out of socket.
Yeah.
I've never experienced that, but I can't imagine that's fun or easy to recover from. He's 37 or 38. He's not a young guy. So there's a possibility he doesn't come back.
I wouldn't be surprised. I was listening to Sirius XM this morning. They were talking about is very close to the Tua Tagovailoa injury. And if that's the case, I mean, you just look at what it took for Tua to come back from that. And I mean, he, everything aside, we all know as we get older, me and you as older men than Tua Tagovailoa is. I mean, not as old as Ryan Fitzpatrick, but we're older than Tua. I mean, my knees creak right now, and I'm not a professional athlete. If you're telling me I dislocated my hip, I'd retire from life. And you're talking about him wanting to come back out there and play football. So I'm with you. I don't know that Fitzpatrick will be back, even not just this year, possibly even next year. So I'm with you on the order too. I think Winston.
He was on the fence about retiring, it seemed like, this offseason. So let's see.
And I'm with you on the order. I mean, in Superflex, I imagine at least two of those guys are taken, even though Tyrod, nobody expected much of him in a Superflex, especially if you're playing Superflex redraft, which I think is a little probably kind of rare, but I guess we play in one. But Tyrod's more than likely already
It's kind of
rostered.
rare unless you're stupid
Yeah.
like us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, unless you're like in 80 leagues like us, or you're just deep into this, it's a little rare.
Ryan Fitzpatrick and Drew Lock were my reserve quarterbacks in Scott Fish.
Yeah, Lock is one of my backups, so I am.
I guess I need to start rooting against Teddy Bridgewater. That's where you're torn between whether you root for your team or you root for your fantasy team.
Yep, I'm right there with you. At running backs, Elijah Mitchell coming in at 6%, Tony Jones Jr. 19%, Kenneth Gainwell 6%, Mark Ingram 16%, and Carlos Hyde 15%. I mean, Elijah Mitchell seems to be the easy, this is the guy I'm going to go for. Is that the same for you, or you look at it a little bit different?
Yeah, Elijah Mitchell is, for me, the clear and away number one waiver order. You're probably best shot at getting him is if you're in a redraft league, because he wasn't the kind of guy that got picked up in redraft. Unfortunately, I know in a lot of the dynasty leagues you play in as well, he was a guy that was routinely going in the third and fourth round because at that point you were taking dart throws, and a 49er dart throw was better than others. I actually forgot that I rostered him in a couple of places until this morning, which was a happy surprise. But he's the kind of guy you're probably putting a lot of fab in for, especially now they have declared Mostert is not going to come back. We know Jeff Wilson could potentially come back, but it's probably Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon, and JaMychal Hasty in there somewhere. And Mitchell seems to be in the driver's seat right now. Had good usage. I think you risk on him. Tony Jones is playing that complementary role to Alvin Kamara. Kenneth Gainwell kind of playing that complementary role to Miles Sanders. He had a good game. Got a touchdown. So he pops up there. Hyde and Mark Ingram are interesting because they're veterans that seem to have the lead role in their backfields right now. The Browns' rush defense looked pretty good against the Chiefs and CEH, and Mark Ingram didn't exactly have a lot of great statistics. So I don't know if I am totally buying into that one. If I was choosing between those veterans, I'd probably lean Hyde. So for me, the final order, Elijah Mitchell by a lot. And then I'm probably taking Gainwell because I think I liked the usage and the opportunity. And then Hyde, Jones, and I'm still not bought in on Ingram.
Yeah, I would. It's probably the same order for me at the end of the day. I mean, Mitchell's the easy one. I think out of this entire list, he's the one guy I'm targeting the most, but I feel like probably everybody is. Now, I don't know what I'm a little bit worried about with Mitchell is now that we know Mostert is done for the season, I would not be surprised if we don't see a little bit more of Trey Sermon. And then if Trey Sermon pops off a couple big runs, what does that do for Mitchell? I think that I could bring him back a little bit. Not much, but he's still my main guy. Really, outside of him, there's not anybody else I love. Maybe Mark Ingram, just because it did seem like he had a role with that Houston offense, even though we don't expect it to be very good. My biggest fear with Carlos Hyde is I think, we talked a little bit about it yesterday. We know James Robinson's the better player, and I know that Urban loves Carlos Hyde. It's his Buckeye. But I feel like once Carlos Hyde starts to possibly slow down or maybe not play as well, Robinson's really going to take over that role, and then you may have just wasted your money on Hyde. So I'm weary on him. Gainwell, I do agree with you on Gainwell. He seemed to be the hurry-up back, and they were splitting carries a lot, like toward the end of the second quarter and like almost a third. It was a lot more Gainwell than we saw of Sanders, and then Sanders kind of came back in. And I expect the Eagles to probably be in most games or behind. I don't know that they'll be leading in a lot of games. So it would probably be for me, Mitchell, Gainwell, Ingram, then Hyde. Just because, again, I could be very wrong on Hyde, but I believe that much that James Robinson's going to kind of take over this backfield at some point. And so I don't know that I want to spend much. Oh, I know. I mean, I've got him in Scott Fishbowl hoping.
That's the most surprising usage.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been surprising usage if he was ceding that work to Travis Etienne. But
yeah,
good grief to Carlos Hyde. They don't have a good matchup this week either, though, because they have Denver's front. And Denver's front was pretty sturdy against Saquon Barkley. And obviously the Jaguars don't have an incredible offensive line.
At the wide receiver position, the big one, Sterling Shepard, just 32%. Then you got Tim Patrick at 1%, Zach Pascal at 2%, Christian Kirk at 9%, KJ Osborne at 0%, Brian Edwards at 17%, and Van Jefferson at 2%.
And you know what's great about this group at receiver is I think there are a lot of guys on here that you could probably also find on waivers in dynasty leagues, which seems crazy. But I know a lot of people kind of gave up on Brian Edwards after last year. I was scooped him off the waiver wire in a couple of places right before the season in dynasty. Was also able to get him for a 4th-round pick. I really like him in long-term leagues. If you can find him, I think he's only going to keep going up. Shepard, I really loved his role and his usage. He seemed to have good chemistry with Daniel Jones. He is probably a guy I would target, especially going into this game. It seems like they're in a good spot. Tim Patrick's an interesting one. Jerry Jeudy is going to be out for at least 4 to 6 weeks. I personally think it could be longer. We've seen Tim Patrick have a good role before. He actually caught a touchdown pass in that game against the Giants on Sunday while Jeudy was still on the field. Pascal, we talked about a little bit yesterday, seems to always work his way in there. And I was really excited with what Christian Kirk did. I want to see a little more consistency. The only 2 on this list I have a question about is Osborne, who kind of came out of nowhere. That's the reason nobody's rostering him. He got 9 targets, same as Justin Jefferson. He put up some decent numbers. Is that sustainable? He would probably be my bottom choice here. Van Jefferson also feels like kind of, he did a lot of his damage on that 67-yard go route where the Bears defenders, for reasons known only to God, decided not to touch him down. That didn't feel like a lot of sustainable volume. It was a big catch, but he does have the potential to have those kind of big catches, but he's competing with Deshaun Jackson and Tutu Atwell for that kind of a role. So he'd probably be my next to last. When you get to those kind of guys at the top, if it's dynasty and you find him, Brian Edwards is by far my number 1. If it's redraft, I think I'm going Shepard, Kirk, Pascal, Edwards, Patrick.
Apologies. Just made a mess of everything. So, anyways, if anybody wants some orange soda, I've got some everywhere. Here you go, bud.
Hopefully it's not in your computer keyboard.
No. Luckily, that is up here on top of the desk here. All right, so I agree with you on Van Jefferson. He is a guy that obviously they talked up a lot last season. And I do think that they're going to throw the ball a lot. So I am a little intrigued by him, but I really think obviously that offense is going to run through Kupp and Woods for the most part. So he's kind of a I don't think Higbee's going to happen. So maybe that's where we differ. Obviously, Shepard
like
is
fetch. I'm going to will it into being.
I hope so. Well, not anymore because I traded for him last year and then I cut him on a team this year because I needed a roster spot. And of course, now's the year he's going to go off. Shepard's the easy one. I mean, as long as he's healthy, he's clearly going to be. I think he finishes a wide receiver 1 this week. I don't know. He finishes a wide receiver 1. But I definitely think he's got wide receiver 2 upside, especially if he's going to get that volume. There is no reason to think that he wouldn't be. He's just got to stay healthy. After him, I mean, Tim Patrick, I don't know because I feel like he's going to get froze out a little bit by Sutton now. Maybe Sutton takes a little bit more of a step forward with Jeudy being out. I know that we kind of had hoped if Locke was the quarterback, that those two seem to have the better connection. Maybe that happens now, though, with Jeudy going down. I still believe Fant's there, and I know Joe Brady had Teddy Bridgewater getting 3 wide receivers relevant last year, but I kind of feel like that may be a little bit limited in Denver because I don't think they're going to pass the ball as much as Carolina did. Outside of them, I mean, I don't trust Zach Pascal. I would probably take a shot on Christian Kirk and Brian Edwards. Just because Kirk, we have seen it. We talked a lot about it yesterday. He's had these really good games, but then it seems like 2 weeks later he gets hurt and then he's out for 4 and then tries to come back and it just never works out. Again, having Hopkins, Rondale Moore, I like that offense altogether. So if I had to pick an order for me, it would definitely be Shepard 1, then Kirk 2, Edwards 3, Jefferson 4, Osborne 4th over Pascal. Because I just think Pascal, and I could be wrong on this, I think Pascal's 5. Sorry. I I just don't believe in Zach Pascal. I think he's just that he hits here and there. That's why I made the joke about it last week that was a Zach Pascal game because it was we didn't think it. And it's always the games you're like, no, this is going to be a Michael Pittman game or a Paris Campbell or Jonathan Taylor, and then here comes Zach Pascal to just like rue the day in fantasy. So I'm the furthest out on him and really Osborne because I'm with you. I really think that's a 2 wide receiver offense. And it's gonna be, in my opinion, Thielen and Jefferson. But if Osborne does it for another week or maybe 2, I could see it happening because I do think defenses are probably adjusting a lot more to Justin Jefferson this year because they actually got all that tape on him and everything. And while he's talented enough to beat that, if defenses are rolling coverages to him, Kirk is not a guy who's going to force it into somebody. So I think he may start jumping off to a guy like Osborne, which could end up then making him fantasy relevant because he doesn't really have that tight end outlet in Kyle Rudolph anymore because Irv Smith's injured.
Based on what we saw on Sunday, though, I'd be worried that Kirk Cousins is going to be on his back a lot since they're playing Arizona, and the Vikings don't have an incredible line.
No, that's one thing I don't think I've ever heard anybody say about the Minnesota Vikings is that they have a good offensive line. Tight end, there's only 3. Jawan Johnson, who's got at 6%, Dalton Schultz at 1, and David Njoku at 1.
Yeah, I mean, there were some other guys. I tried to pick interesting ones you might have a chance of actually getting. Jawan Johnson is by far my top pick there. We thought whoever was the tight end, the focal tight end for the Saints would be good value. I think we had all thought it was going to be Adam Troutman, or at least we're trying to hope that it would be Adam Troutman, but it seems like apparently the best kept secret from camp is that they like Jawan Johnson and that he was trending toward being the number 1 tight end before the regular season. Some of these beat reporters are really quick on the draw with facts after the fact, which has been wonderful. I know there was a lot of complaints about some of the Bay Area beat reporters waiting after the game kicked off to say, oh yeah, Trey Sermon's behind all these guys. Oh yeah, Brandon Ayuk's fallen out of favor. These would have been things that I would like to know yesterday, to quote.
So the funny thing is, I heard a thing today about Ayuk that it was actually because he's been dealing with an injury. And if you go and look at the second half, he was actually getting more snaps than the other wide receivers. It was just that he was dealing with an injury, so they kind of slowed him up at first. But then in the second half, he was out there. He just never really got targeted. So I guess I don't know what to believe with the 49ers because maybe I'm wrong. I could have swore I remember them talking up how good Trey Sermon looked like all offseason. Yeah. And now all of a sudden he's been beaten out by Elijah Mitchell and JaMychal Hasty.
We made some jokes about how often Derek Carr was targeting Darren Waller, but if you look at the San Francisco pass distribution, he literally seemed to only have eyes for Deebo Samuel. The dude got 12 targets. Kittle got like 7, and then I think the next closest was Sheffield with 3. So there wasn't a lot of target spread distribution.
Yeah.
We'll have to see. I'm hoping Ayuk's a one off, but I'm a little nervous because the hope was that he was clearly above Deebo Samuel and didn't feel like that right now. But back to these tight ends, Jawan Johnson's probably the guy I'm going after. I liked Dalton Schultz coming into the season. I thought he was going to have more of a role than people thought. That being said, I don't know if I feel consistent that he's going to get you tight end 15 or higher every week. I think that both those Dallas tight ends are involved, and there's going to be a lot of weeks where they're in the tight end 20 to 27 range, which is what gives me a little bit of a moment of pause there. David Njoku, same thing we kind of talked about yesterday. He's probably one of 3 tight ends that's going to be used while they use 5 receivers and 2 running backs. I don't know if, Njoku and Schultz are decent stashes, but I don't know if they'll have consistent enough volume. The only one that I think could be a potentially startable option is Jawan Johnson, who saw 3 targets out of 20 pass attempts, caught all 3 for 21 yards, 2 touchdowns, means they're looking for him in the red zone.
Yeah, I mean, the one good news I'll say just back to Ayuk really quick is Deebo Samuel's likely going to get hurt here in the next couple of weeks. So then it'll be Ayuk to the moon if he's not getting targeted by next week. I think I'm going to go Njoku. He looked really good the Browns were targeting him. He had more targets than Austin Hooper. I would not be surprised if they continue to use Hooper like they did last year. Is that kind of like in-line blocker to help with the offensive line, especially with Wills being day-to-day. I don't think he's going to be back by this week, which then frees up Njoku. Now, maybe with Odell coming back, Njoku won't get as many targets, but he looked good. I would not be surprised if he is at least decent for the next couple weeks. All right, last thing for Tuesday, and we're going to continue to do this every single week just to give you guys an idea of what we did and didn't do good on in our weekly rankings. Again, Matt, myself, and Brandon Hay do weekly NFL rankings to help you with your tough start, sit, lineup questions. Those get dropped every supposedly Wednesday night, but sometimes Colin doesn't get to them till Thursday mornings. Don't hold it against him.
Do it until we get fired anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, after this week, I wouldn't be surprised if Colin reaches out to me. He's like, hey, by the way, can we just have Matt and Brandon do them from now on? I'm like, yeah, sure. Sorry, guys. So
I don't know that I was much better than you.
I did not have a whole lot of hits this week, so I'll just read my biggest ones. That when I consider a hit is either obviously right on the nose or within a couple spots. I'm not stretching it to 5 or 10, but if I'm within 2 to 3, I feel like that's pretty fair. I mean, let's all be honest. Nobody's ever going to hit every single ranking dead right or even 50%. There's a lot of projection that goes into this stuff, and at the end of the day, it is human beings playing the game. If it was just done on computers, we would all be very good at fantasy. So the guys that I got the closest to and did really good on, Jalen Hurts at quarterback, Kareem Hunt, Miles Sanders at running back, and then CeeDee Lamb. And that's it. Everybody else was just kind of like, I mean, they weren't horrible, but those are really the best ones I think that were my hits this week. What about yourself?
Yeah, so I went and did hits and misses, one for each position except for wide receiver. There was nothing that I considered a great hit. So for me, a hit at quarterback, I called Kyler Murray being QB1. He actually finished as QB1, so I thought that worked out. Running back, I had projected Nick Chubb to finish RB6. I was a little bit higher than you guys who thought he'd be lower. He finished as RB5, so I felt pretty good about that. And then Noah Fant, I projected him as tight end 7. He ended up as tight end 8. I thought against that kind of Giants defense, he was going to be a focal point for Teddy. He really was. Could have been a little bit better if they would have connected, much like Andrews, on a couple of those long bombs.
Yeah. So on our misses, I had a laundry list here at quarterback. So Trevor Lawrence, who I had down in the 20s, finished as a QB 12, I believe, this week. Maybe even higher. He was very, very good. 12, yeah. So he finished as QB 12. I had Daniel. Why it's not
Daniel Jones?
Daniel Jones. Why do I want to keep calling him Daniel Jackson for some reason? Daniel Jones, I had it down, I believe, at 28. He finished all the way up at where 14. Was it? 14. So he had a much better day than I expected. I mean, Tyrod Taylor is the obvious easy one. We'll skip that. I had Lamar Jackson as my QB1 this week. He finished all the 20. Way up at 20. So that was a big miss on my end.
I think that's got to be because of that fumble at the end, right?
I guess so. I mean, that's only 2 points, right? That's only 2 points, though. That's not that big.
To be fair, though, the difference between QB 20 and QB 9 was only 7 points.
Yeah, but still, I mean, that's only 2 points. So it bumps him up to like QB 15. I had him as QB 1 on the week. I wasn't riding that Kyler Murray train like you and Dennis were. So I was even if he goes up to QB 9, I think that's a miss on my part. So
Kyler, but I also thought Tennessee's defense might still be suspect, and
right,
they were.
And then last but not
was
least,
better than we expected. So
yeah, that whole team looked a lot better than I thought they were going to be. And then Aaron Rodgers as well. I had him all the way up at QB 6. He finished it down at QB 34. So he didn't even make the start at 32. So
yeah, he did finish as the best Green Bay quarterback, though. Jordan Love came in at 36. Only 40 quarterbacks recorded enough stats to qualify for Fantasy Pro, so 34, not a great. No. Rodgers was a big miss for me, but since you touched on that, I missed on Hurts. I wasn't a big believer. I had him at 17 and obviously finished in the top 10. For me, running back, the big miss I thought was Austin Eckler. We talked about it last week. I've liked him as a top 10. I put him at RB9. He ended up as RB27 because he's simply not getting. He didn't get any targets and any passing work. I think that's something to watch going forward. Wide receiver was rough. I had Deebo Samuel at wide receiver 51. I actually thought that Ayuk was going to be the better receiver, but that Kittle was going to dominate. And Deebo Samuel was wide receiver 3 on the week. So that was an incredibly tough one. And Sterling Shepard, I didn't even rank. I thought he would be an afterthought among the Giants. He finished as wide receiver 8. Big tight end miss for me. I had Gronkowski as tight end 22. I just didn't think they could feed everyone. He was tight end 1 this week and looked like Patriots Gronk.
Yeah, so obviously I missed on some of the guys you just mentioned there as well. Didn't have Shepard ranked that high. I had I actually think I only ranked Galladay from
I realized
from the Giants. Deebo as well. I had Ayuk ranked fairly high. One of my biggest ones, I think, on the wide receivers were Antonio Brown and then Sterling Shepard. Obviously, Brown I had ranked way below the other two for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Obviously, he has a massive day. And then David Montgomery, I had him as running back 16, finished as running back 5, I believe, on the week. I mean, he just had a massive 4, running back 4. So great day for David Montgomery, and I was not expecting that at all. I thought the Rams defense would be able to bottle him up for the most part. He definitely proved a lot of us wrong, looking just like the guy he finished the season as. So,
well, Jamal Williams, we'll have to see if it was garbage time, but I had him in the 30s. He seemed to be a pretty solid running back 3, finished as RB2.
Yeah, it's was definitely a weird week, but hey, now we know we can focus on next week and improve the process and try and get, only 15 wrong instead of however many we got wrong now. But we will, Matt and myself will be back again tomorrow to give you guys some of our ranking stuff, and then we will preview the Thursday night football game, which is Giants-Washington.
Yeah, a nice
awesome.
6-3 game to kick off the second week.
That's all right. That just means I get to go to bed early. I'm not gonna fight it. Not gonna fight it at this point. Just got to figure out if I want to start Saquon Barkley because I feel like that's probably a bad decision at this point.
I think he probably needs. I obviously saw a lot of him because I was watching the Denver game, and Denver does have a decent defensive front, and the Giants' offensive line isn't incredible. But to me, he also looks like a guy who's trying to work himself back into game shape after he wasn't even getting significant practice reps until last week. Now you're talking about a short week. I think they're going to be careful.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some decent options, but we'll definitely talk more about that tomorrow as we go through all of our rankings and preview the Thursday night football game. Everybody have yourself a great Tuesday.